Hi, I'm Antonio Mora. Why can't we all just get along? That's how we've come to remember what Rodney King said as riots raged in Los Angeles almost exactly 28 years ago. Some of you might ask who that is. While it may seem like yesterday to many of us, more than half of all Americans weren't born or were less than 10 years old when King, a construction worker, first burst onto the American consciousness. Back then, none of us had video cameras in our pockets, and surveillance video wasn't common either. So it was especially shocking when people saw video of King, who was black, being brutally beaten by white Los Angeles Police Department officers after he tried to escape them in a high-speed chase for suspected drunk driving in March of 1991. The video shows officers kicking and beating King with batons dozens of times for as much as 15 minutes after he'd been tasered twice and was on the ground. The violence was shocking, as were King's injuries. According to a lawsuit he later filed, they included 11 skull fractures, permanent brain damage, broken bones and teeth, and kidney failure. The painful-to-watch images, played repeatedly on news shows and seen by almost everyone, infuriated people across the country and provided first-hand evidence of long-standing African-American complaints about police abuses. 4 of the 14 officers who were on scene were eventually tried on police brutality charges. The use of force was so excessive that surveys showed the overwhelming majority of Americans expected guilty verdicts. But a jury of 10 whites, 1 Latino, and 1 Asian focused on an early move King made toward an officer and the fact that King made attempts to get up in order to justify the use of force against him. None of the officers were convicted. Within hours of the verdict, outrage turned to violence, and Los Angeles erupted in anger and flames. Thousands engaged in widespread arson, looting, and assault, including the attack on truck driver Reginald Denny, who was dragged from his truck on the first day of the riots. Horrifying helicopter video shows him being beaten, kicked, and struck with a cinder block. Denny almost died after his skull was reportedly fractured in 91 places. The unrest spread to other cities and lasted for 5 days in Los Angeles. Within little more than a day, 6,000 National Guard troops were deployed, but calm didn't come to the city until 3,500 soldiers and Marines were also called up. By then, 63 people had been killed, 2,300 injured, more than 12,000 arrested, and more than 1,000 buildings destroyed by fire. Damages exceeded $1 billion, making it the costliest episode of civil unrest in U.S. history by far. As the riots raged, King went before cameras and made a live, emotional appeal for an end to the violence, saying it's not right and it's not going to change anything. He asked, can we all get along? The question still resonates today after America has seen the worst violence since then. It's a question that needs to be asked of our police departments that haven't learned the lessons of 1992 and failed to fully implement the reforms needed to curb brutality and racial injustice. It's a question that needs to be asked of the rioters who shamefully destroyed businesses, especially hurting minority neighborhoods. It needs to be asked of the President of the United States, who has done little to help unite us and often seems to enjoy dividing us. It needs to be asked of congressional leaders who politicize everything. It needs to be asked of some civil rights leaders who didn't follow the preaching of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the worst among them, even condoned the violence. It's a question that needs to be asked of corporate America, where minorities remain underrepresented in positions of power. And it needs to be asked of the media, which all too often fans the flames of divisiveness and polarization. Of course, they all have far different degrees of responsibility, but that doesn't absolve any of them. Rodney King died 8 years ago. I wonder what he would say today. He was not a saint and not a hero, but you can't deny the wisdom of the message he sent with his simple question: can we all get along? It really shouldn't be this hard.